As you already know, and you play lots of them all the time, a chord is a group of pitches that forms a single harmonic idea. The use of chords is the basic foundation of harmony. A triad is a three-note chord built like a snowman, made up of two intervals stacked in thirds. The lowest note of the chord is called the root. The middle note is called the third, because it is an interval of a third above the root, and the upper note is called the fifth. And it's called the fifth because it's a fifth above the root. In order to build triads, you must know your intervals. As you can see from this illustration here, a major triad is made up of a major third plus a perfect fifth. A minor third plus a perfect fifth will give you a minor triad. A minor third plus a diminished fifth will give you a diminished triad. And a major third plus an augmented fifth will give you an augmented triad. Let's look at how we can examine these triads and build them thinking another way, starting with the major triad. So here we have the E major triad. If I sharp the fifth of the triad, I now have an augmented triad because I have a major third and another major third stacked on top of it. On the other hand, if I lower the third and keep the fifth of the original triad at its pitch, I have a minor triad. And if I lower the third and lower the fifth, I have a diminished triad. Here we have the F major triad. We've done the same kind of thing. In the first chord, we have raised the fifth. So we have a major third and a major third. In this second chord, we have lowered the third, and the fifth is already lowered. It's in its original form. So you have a minor triad, and in the third chord, you have a lowered fifth and a lowered third. So you have a diminished triad. Here is the same process with the B-flat major triad. Take a moment to examine this and figure out how the different configurations were arrived at. Once you are comfortable with building triads in all their qualities, major, minor, diminished, or augmented, it's time to look at real music and recognize chords in context. Much of the music we studied this year has 4 parts or voices, and that includes the music you will be writing. When we have 4 parts and only 3 chord members, then one note of the chord has to be doubled, that is, repeated. This is usually, but not always, the root. When you are analyzing music for chord quality, the first thing that has to be determined is the root of the chord. Chords are not always written in nice, neat order, and the lowest sounding note, that is, the bass, is not always the root. So, when you're looking at a 4-part chord, stack your chords in thirds, find the root, and determine the quality. Label the chord by the root name and the quality. For example, capital G, capital M if it's a G major chord, lowercase g, lowercase m if it's a minor chord, and so on. What about chord inversions? Triads that have a chord member other than the root as the lowest sounding voice, the bass, are called inversions. When you move the position of any chord members an interval inverts. Any member of the chord may sound in the bass. And since there are 3 notes in the triad, there are 3 possible positions: the root position, the first inversion, and the second inversion. As you can see, when you are in first inversion, the lowest note of the chord is the third of the chord. When you are in second inversion, the lowest note of the chord is the fifth. In its simplest form, when a chord is in root position, the intervals above the bass note, the root, are a third and a fifth. And when a chord is in first inversion, in its simplest form, the intervals above the bass are a third and a sixth. And when a chord is in second inversion, the bass note is the fifth of the chord, and the intervals above the bass are a sixth and a fourth. And yes, as we've already seen, the fourth above the bass in the second inversion triad is a dissonant interval and must be handled with care. If you go back to the interval exercise we did on Aurelia, you will notice that chords 4, 6, and 11, which have a perfect fourth against the bass, are all second inversion chords. This is information we will revisit again when we are discussing chord symbols and inversions and when you begin writing 4-part harmony. Now to move on to the basic 7th chords. A 7th chord contains 4 notes, so it's never called a triad, it is a chord. It contains the root, the third, the fifth, and an added 7th. Because this arrangement of tones contains the interval of a 7th, which is the dissonant interval, all 7th chords are considered dissonant or unstable, and they must be prepared and resolved with care. Given the types of triads combined with the types of 7ths, there are 16 possibilities of 7th chords. Although other types are possible, 5 types of 7th chords are most often used in common practice music and are prevalent on the AP Music Theory exam, and these are the 5 7th chords you must know. The first of these is the major 7th, which consists of a major triad and a major 7th. It's abbreviated capital M, 7. It consists of a major third, if we're talking about the stacks, major third, a minor third, and a major third. The second type of 7th chord is the dominant 7th or major minor 7th chord. It consists of a major triad plus a minor 7th. It's abbreviated capital M, lowercase m, 7. And it consists of a major third, a minor third, and a minor third stacked above each other. The third type of 7th chord is the minor 7th. It is a minor triad plus a minor 7th, and it's abbreviated as MM7. And if we look at the stacked intervals, they are a minor third, a major third, and a minor third. The fourth type is the half-diminished 7th chord. This consists of a diminished triad and a minor 7th. And it's abbreviated dim M7, or you can actually say M7 with a little degree sign, or in stacked, talking about it from stacked viewpoint, it's a minor third, and a major third. The fully diminished 7th consists of a diminished triad plus a diminished 7th, and it in its stacked form is 3 minor thirds. Here's how these look if we're building them on G. The major 7th consists of the major triad plus the major seventh, and it sounds like this. The dominant seventh consists of a major triad plus the minor seventh, and it sounds like this. The minor seventh chord consists of a minor triad plus a minor seventh. In the half diminished seventh chord, we have a minor triad with a flatted fifth, so that's a diminished triad plus a minor seventh. And finally, we have the fully diminished seventh, consisting entirely of minor thirds. Now let's look at the inversions of seventh chords. It's easy enough to identify seventh chords when they're in their root position because they are stacked thirds. And when they're not stacked thirds, then it becomes a little bit more difficult. So, remember that a seventh inverts to a second. So to find the two notes that are a second apart, the root of the chord is the higher of the two notes. So if we look at this second chord here, you can see that we have the third in the bass, but we have the two notes on top which are a second apart. And the higher of those two notes, G, is the root of the chord. In the next one, which is the seventh chord in second inversion, the two notes that are right next to each other are F and G. And again, the higher of those two notes, the G, is the root of the chord. And finally, in the third inversion, those two notes that are right next to each other are going to be at the bottom. And the seventh of the chord is the one note that's going to be in the bass.